I've always been a fan of the Universal theme parks. They allow guests to truly step foot into the movies with their world-class dark rides and immersive atmospheres. So I was particularly excited to visit Dubai's ambitious take on that style with Motiongate. Opening at the end of 2016, the idea was to bring an Orlando-style destination to the UAE. The park features 5 themed areas based around motion picture studios like DreamWorks and Lionsgate, and is accompanied by a city walk-style shopping district and a wilderness lodge-style on-site resort. And this is just one portion of the larger Dubai Parks and Resorts project. This is a complex made up of 3 parks. You have Motiongate, Legoland Dubai, and the now Real Madrid Park, which is formerly a Bollywood park. But that wasn't even the original idea. There were talks of including a marine park in the style of SeaWorld, a safari park, and probably the most well-known canceled project, Six Flags Dubai. They wanted to make Dubai the theme park capital of the world, but when all these projects started opening, nobody came. Motiongate was originally supposed to open in 2014. It was delayed until the very end of 2016. They are projected to receive 6 million visitors in its opening year and only received 1 million. Which is still a good amount of people, all things considered, but it vastly underperformed, which is why you'll see these massive queues clearly designed to hold a lot of people. But the reality is, you probably aren't going to have to wait very long for most of these rides. Motiongate is open year-round, 365 days a year, typically from like 11 a.m. until 8 or 9 p.m. It's actually cheaper to get into than the nearby IMG Worlds of Adventures or the Abu Dhabi parks. If you go online, you can get a day ticket for 295 AED, which equates to about 80 US dollars. Most of those other parks go for about 100, which all things considered, $80 is still pretty expensive for a day ticket to a theme park, very similar to Orlando prices. But again, this is designed to be a destination. The whole complex is located outside of the city of Dubai, so it feels like you're leaving the familiar and entering this new world. The problem is, I actually think it's a little too far from the city center of Dubai, that it deters people from going there as often as they probably would otherwise. The Dubai Parks and Resorts complex is located off of the Sheikh Zayed Road. That's the same road that you take to get from Dubai to Abu Dhabi. When you take the exit, you get free parking over at Riverland. That's the shopping district you're going to have to walk through to get to the entrance of Motiongate. It's this big central hub that connects Motiongate, Legoland, and Real Madrid Park, clearly intended to be a bustling place with tons of stores and businesses and restaurants, but instead, it's quiet. Most of the buildings were empty. There were a couple of restaurants still left standing, but it seems like everything that used to be there closed up. It's kind of depressing because it's clearly meant to be so much more. Because design-wise, for all intents and purposes, this should work. It's very obvious that they're emulating City Walk, but this, unlike City Walk, is a failure. I hated walking through it to get to Motiongate. I just felt weird being there. And later on, when we talked to some people who worked at Motiongate, they said that the crowd levels that we are seeing on property were pretty normal. And it's not like we went during an off time of year either. Our one and only visit was in February, which is towards the end of their peak season. December is usually the busiest month, and then January would follow. But still was not what you want to see. Now, in our case, when we visited Motiongate, we stayed on site at the Lapita Hotel, which was absolutely beautiful. You can see the park from the complex. There are so many buildings, very elaborately themed. Not cheap by any means, but really a fabulous on-site resort that unfortunately also didn't seem to be too busy. I wonder if it was too expensive for most people to pay. I mean, that's why we only did one night there. But one of the biggest conveniences is that they have shuttles going throughout the resort that'll take you directly to the entrance of Riverland, and you just cross a bridge straight into the park. We got to Motiongate right at open, which is definitely something that I recommend because even though it probably won't be super busy when you go, there is a lot to do here. Take advantage of that full day. The park is 45 acres in size, has 29 rides, 7 of those are roller coasters, and 1 of those is a water ride. And unlike some parks where you really could pick and choose what attractions to do, it's not a big deal if you miss them. Motiongate is one of those places that I would actually encourage doing most attractions here, unless it's like a kiddie flat ride. They're all of good quality. There clearly was a lot of love and passion that was put into this place. And that became very apparent the second we saw the front entrance. Motiongate's front gate is a huge film reel. Obviously old Hollywood inspired and is beautiful. One of my favorite front entrances that I can think of. It's wildly impressive and that pathway leading up to it is just so wide and spacious. And once you pass beyond the turnstiles, you're greeted with Studio Central. This is your Main Street USA equivalent, just a long pathway leading up to your central hub. No rides off of here, but some restaurants and your big gift shops. Motiongate actually had some of the best merchandise out of any of the parks that we visited in the Emirates. I think everyone in our group at some point ended up taking home a shirt, so definitely go check that out. This pathway truly is a beautiful tribute to filmmaking. I love the facades, the fountain in the center, all the little details. It reminds me of the entrance to Disney's Hollywood Studios or Universal Studios. And much like Magic Kingdom with Main Street USA, once you reach the end of this pathway, you split off into all the different lands. Each of the lands are based around different motion picture studios. So to the left is Lionsgate. Directly ahead, Dreamworks. That's a completely indoor space. Slight right, Smurf Village, that's the only one that's the oddball here. And then to your right, Columbia Pictures. Motiongate has a hub and spokes layout. It's a very smart design. The only downside with this is that almost all of these areas are a dead end. So once you've completed your attractions in each section, you then have to leave, re-enter the hub, and then move on to your next section. Versus the different lands at like Magic Kingdom, you can enter the next land over from the other side. So we'll break Motiongate down section by section. We'll go clockwise around the park. So we'll start with Lionsgate. Upon entry into this section, you're greeted with the Hunger Games. Most of this land is themed to Pan Am, the fictional realm within that series. There are only 2 rides and attractions here. That is Capital Bullet Train, the roller coaster, and then Pan Am Aerial Tour, which is a simulator. There's already a full separate review of Capital Bullet Train up on this channel, so go check out that video if you want to hear about that ride. Pan Am Aerial Tour was a strange one. The idea here is that you're taking a tour of Pan Am. Oh no, something goes wrong. We gotta get out of here. You made it. Hooray. Very simple story. But it's strange in a way that it uses a ride system that I've never really seen before. You take a seat in your vehicle and then it just pushes forward into this dome. And the picture quality was okay. I really didn't like that you could like see the creases in the dome, and to me that was like a little distracting. But it was at least cool that the scenery was all around us instead of like one dimension, like just in front of you. Still worth doing, but in my opinion, this is one of the weaker rides in the park. But I still think that at least in like the exteriors of this land and the overall design, it really did emulate the vibe that you get from the Hunger Games series. Originally, this was all that the Lionsgate section was, but they did expand it shortly after opening with the addition of an S&S free spin and a Mauer spinning coaster. These were originally planned for Six Flags Dubai, which is that 4th gate park. After it was canceled due to low attendance at the other parks, they decided to distribute the attractions, and Motiongate received these 2 roller coasters, so they themed the free spin to John Wick, and the spinning coaster is Now You See Me. John Wick was unfortunately closed to us due to its annual maintenance, but we've done many exact clones of this across the world. This is the only one in the Middle East though, so it's still a good fit at the park. The big reason why I'd recommend doing this ride though, if it's open, is for the queue. John Wick Open Contract has one of the best queues I have ever seen in my entire life. Even if you haven't seen the movies, I have, so like I appreciate all the little details, but it is just absolutely beautiful. And what's so cool, because of the way the loading station is set up, you can either go to the left or to the right. So for this queue, if you go one way, you're helping John Wick, and if you go the other way, you're against John Wick. And so each side has different details, and I love that. Apparently they worked hand in hand with the studio to get this exactly right, and it is just so well done. There's a lot of good queues here at Motiongate, but this one was my favorite. Now You See Me High Roller, however, was a slightly different story. The pathway leading to this ride is stunning. It's designed to look like Las Vegas. There's this massive cover directly overhead with a screen staring down at you. Some really impressive designs on there, something that you gotta see at night for sure. That's really when this stands out. It has a beautiful entrance, but then the queue I thought was kinda okay. There's a lot of black walls, which they say it's because you're backstage at one of their shows. But in my opinion, it just felt like a bit of a cop-out. It just didn't look finished. And then when you actually get to the station, it's just like the most basic loading platform ever. And the actual ride experience has like no theming during it at all. It's a roller coaster in the desert. And it didn't even spin that much. Apparently they put dampeners in it to increase its reliability, so it just doesn't spin as crazy as some other Mauer spinners. I did this ride twice, and both times our vehicle was off balance, and we really didn't spin a whole lot. So in my opinion, this is a one and done. Also probably because it is lower capacity. During our visit, Now You See Me High Roller was posted at 45 minutes, when most other lines were between 5 and 15 minutes. So for that reason, I would actually recommend going here first. Just get it done and out of the way. So overall, the Lionsgate section is pretty solid. I'm familiar with all the movies that they chose here. I like them. I think they did a pretty good job with presentation. And there is still expansion room back there. So if one day they decided to put in more rides, they have options. So we'll go ahead and exit Lionsgate. As you're walking over to DreamWorks, you'll see an indoor theater that has a stage show called Illuminate. Unfortunately, something we didn't get around to. This DreamWorks building is absolutely massive. I love the painted cloud design. It's very simple, just meant to emulate the logo, but it totally works. And I think it's smart that they put some of the individual characters out front so you know what lands you're about to step into. This is easily the largest section of the park because it is 4 mini lands, and it's really like you just walked into the movies. From the sliding doors, you're immediately greeted with air conditioning. There's a gift shop on each side. Directly ahead is this big old focal point, this beautiful fountain that unfortunately was under maintenance during our visit. It's called the Fountain of Dreams. This is what it's supposed to look like. Stunning design. I hope to see it in person one day. And surrounding the fountain is the entrance to some of the different lands. We have Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, Madagascar, and Kung Fu Panda. And this DreamWorks building is a smaller hub and spokes layout within the larger hub and spokes layout of the entire park. But unlike the other areas that are all dead ends, here the lands connect, so you can access How to Train Your Dragon, for instance, from the other side of Shrek. We started with the Shrek land themed after his swamp. There's a castle. You see the onion carriage. It is just beautiful. They're playing music from the movie, and there's a lot of different nods to different gems within the film. To enter the main Shrek ride, you have to walk into his home. You're stepping foot into the swamp, and you're greeted with a trackless dark ride. Motiongate has a lot of these, 4 to be exact. And they are all built by the same manufacturer, ETF Systems. So in a weird way, all the dark rides feel similar even if the scenery around you is different. The ride vehicles have very basic movement. You essentially move at one constant speed the whole time, which definitely starts to get old after a while. That actually becomes more of a problem with some of the other dark rides we'll talk about later on. But this Shrek ride was just unbelievable. This was our favorite dark ride in the park. Actually, our favorite dark ride in all of the UAE. It tells the story of the first movie in the form of a puppet show. At the beginning of the ride, you see Shrek and Fiona with their puppets telling the story to their kids, and then you go through the movie scene by scene. It doesn't skip anything. It's a long ride, and it is just amazing. You could have never seen Shrek before, and you would know exactly what is going on. It was unbelievable. You could easily pick up this ride and drop it into a Universal or Disney park, and it would be better than some of the current dark rides at Universal or Disney. Brilliant, brilliant ride. So we'll move on from the Shrek land into How to Train Your Dragon. Welcome to the Isle of Berk. This is set within the first How to Train Your Dragon movie. So if you're familiar with the land going to Epic Universe, that is after the Vikings and dragons have come together. So it's a lot more colorful. This is the original Berk setting, and it is beautiful. They're also playing music from the movie. You enter essentially on level 2. You can see a playground down below. You can see a swinging ship off to the side. That's one of 2 main rides in this area, which swinging ship in a Viking land, perfect. There's a quick service restaurant on the other side, and you can see the Dragon Gliders roller coaster passing overhead. This is a Mock Rides powered coaster, another ride that has a full separate review already up on this channel. This is one of the best family coasters I have ever ridden. We did it several times. I was a huge fan of it, and I love the How to Train Your Dragon movies, so this entire land just made my heart happy. They spared no expense in this land, or the entire DreamWorks building, to be frank. Next up was Madagascar, and this land is so fun. It's based around the 3rd film, so it's the circus theme, and I feel like that was a great decision because it really captures the essence of those movies, and it's a completely different vibe from those other sections, so everything's very colorful. There are 3 rides. You have a carousel with all the different characters going around. Very cool. There's a small Zamperla flat ride, and then you have Madagascar Mad Pursuit. This is a Gerstlauer Infinity coaster. Most of it takes place in the dark, but they do have a couple themed sections where you have some of the different Madagascar characters out in front. Also, a story-driven ride, a really good coaster. It doesn't feature any inversions or anything, which is actually pretty different. Most Gerstlauer Infinity coasters do. There's no lift hill, just the one launched at the beginning, and it really surprised me. I didn't know much about this ride or much about the Madagascar land as a whole, but I was really impressed. And finally, that brings us to the Kung Fu Panda land. And I haven't been to Universal Studios Beijing, but I know they have like a much larger dedicated indoor Kung Fu Panda space, and I feel like it has a lot in common with this. But I guess technically this came first. I love the Chinese architecture. Inside is a teacup flat ride themed to a cup of noodles, perfect. And then a 4D theater called Unstoppable Awesomeness. This is very similar to the one at Universal Hollywood. We unfortunately didn't get around to this. It was actually closed due to annual maintenance. Not a big deal, but just from what I've heard, I feel like Kung Fu Panda deserves like a true themed dark ride. I know Universal Studios Beijing has a boat ride, and I feel like that would just be perfect here. Because there's only one water ride that we mentioned earlier, and that's in the Columbia Pictures section themed to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. A slow-moving boat ride would be really nice in this park. And then the last thing in this section is Mr. Ping's Noodles, which is a great noodles place that we almost ate at. We instead just got drinks, but the menu looked very, very good. Whenever I go back one day, maybe I'll eat here. But that's your Crash Course DreamWorks section. So as you can see, each of the individual lands are just stunning. A perfect representation of those movies and really a gold standard of theming. I think this is the best section of Motiongate. It feels like its own separate indoor theme park, and it's unbelievable. Between this DreamWorks section, IMG Worlds of Adventures, SeaWorld Abu Dhabi, Warner Brothers, they completely ruined indoor theme parks for me, because none will be as good as these. The people out here know how to do indoor theme parks, which is probably a good thing because it gets very hot out here. Probably smart that the biggest section of the park is indoors. The only downside I'll give, it is dark inside the entire building, which is cool for atmosphere, but it definitely throws off your sense of time. IMG had the same issue. So we'll continue moving clockwise as we exit DreamWorks. We enter Smurf Village. And frankly, this was the land I spent the least amount of time in, which makes sense. It's definitely geared more towards kids. I did take a lap on their kids coaster, which goes around twice. Actually decently well themed for a kids coaster. And they do also have a dark ride here. Another one that's slow moving, cute story. I like all the different characters. Not as strong of a ride as some of the others here in the park, but I'm also not familiar with the Smurfs at all. I don't know who any of these characters are. I've never seen any of the movies, so I can't really speak on how closely it matches the subject matter, but I do know that the Smurfs are really popular in this part of the world, and I think kids will really like this, as well as the entire land. All the different mushroom houses, so cute. And finally, that brings us into Columbia Pictures. This is a mishmash of a bunch of different movies, so directly to your right is the Green Hornet coaster. This is a Gerstlauer bobsled with pretty much no theming during the ride at all. It has a decently themed queue, nothing crazy, but probably the most forgettable ride in the park. It also doesn't help that it has a very forgettable theme, like who likes Green Hornet? Bit of an odd choice in my opinion to theme a ride to that. I feel like that is definitely a dying IP. To the left is a Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs themed restaurant based around Baby Brent. There's massive food barreling through the ceiling. This is where we had our lunch. Everything was delicious, and thematically, it was just so on brand for the film. Extremely clever. I love that this is here, and it's not the only thing tied with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Of course, we have that rapids ride that I mentioned earlier. This is called River Expedition, and it is extremely tame as far as rapids go. You probably won't get very wet on it at all, which is frankly a little strange because, again, it gets very hot here, so I feel like they would want something that would get you pretty wet. But the theming was really fun. You travel through all these funny food creations. Everything is just on this big grand scale. Most of the ride was fantastic, though there were a couple moments when you could clearly tell that you were like near a backstage area, and you could see some areas that were a little unappealing, and that does break the immersion. So I would say if they were to cover those up and maybe make the rapids a bit more extreme, then this would get an A+ for me. Directly next door is the Zombieland S&S shot tower. It is called Blast Off. It is a pretty dark and intense queue. Funny enough, the second ride in this park based around a movie starring Woody Harrelson and Jesse Eisenberg. And even funnier, this is an S&S shot tower themed to an S&S shot tower. Specifically the one at Wild Adventures where Zombieland was shot. This is also a relatively tame tower. It's not super tall. Gives you a bit of air as you rise up and drop down, but nothing crazy. Definitely the scariest part of this ride is the queue. And then finally, we have our last two dark rides in the park. Transylvania is a beautifully themed ride that just goes on for too long. Remember how I mentioned with this ride system, it doesn't have like a variable speed? You just go too slow through these different sections. It feels like they are trying to emulate Symbolica at Efteling, how you're taking a tour through this beautiful manor, seeing different rooms. I love that you can see all the different ride vehicles going around and the detail is amazing, but in its current state, it's borderline boring. If you went through it at like a 50% faster speed, my opinion of this ride would be a lot higher. And finally, we have Ghostbusters Battle for New York. And unfortunately, this was the weakest dark ride in the park, which sucks because it was the last one we did. And I think I just set my expectations too high because we started with Shrek, which was just the best. The big difference between this ride and some of the others is that this is a shooting dark ride and it utilizes a lot more screens. So, okay, I like that that is different from all the others. It sets it apart. But I just think the shooting aspect was not that well done. The screen quality was okay. And even the physical sets were pretty underwhelming. And that's just unfortunate because the Ghostbusters deserve a world-class dark ride. There's so much potential. I think the way that this could have been an absolute win is if it was more in the style of Men in Black. Still shooting ride, but practical sets, real monsters. That would be amazing. So overall, now that we've gone through the different sections and attractions of Motiongate, as you can see, most things are pretty well done, but it did feel like perhaps they went through a bit more quantity than quality. I would have rather had one less dark ride if it meant that we could beef up a couple of the other ones. Shrek, in my opinion, is the only one that they clearly went all out for. But that being said, all of the dark rides are better than most that you would find at other theme parks. Like in theory, you could pick up the Transylvania dark ride, plop it down at any park in the US that isn't like Disney or Universal. It'd be the best dark ride there. It wouldn't even be close. But it just so happens that in the United Arab Emirates, there are a lot of dark rides between all the parks. So you have a lot of competition, a lot of things you can compare them to. But I love all the cues that they gave them. Each one of them felt like its own personal little walkthrough attraction. I didn't mind taking my time looking at all the details. There wasn't a wait, so I was just strolling through at my own pace. And frankly, it made me a little sad that there weren't a lot of people there. From what we understand, we went on a pretty average day for the park. It wasn't dead. Like, it was definitely more lively than when we went to IMG. But I wish this park pulled similar numbers to what some of the Abu Dhabi parks get. Because in my opinion, it's deserving of it. It feels like a true resort destination, a lot more so than IMG. The park is well taken care of. They have lots of different forms of entertainment, also including walk-around characters, shows just off of some of the pathways. The only thing it was really missing was a big nighttime spectacular. I feel like there should have been some sort of fireworks or fountain or lights display. They're far enough away from the main city. I feel like they could totally do one, and frankly, this is one of the only outdoor parks in the entire country. So it's a shame that they're missing out on that opportunity. I am very curious to see what the future holds for Motiongate. If their attendance numbers rise and they're looking to install future attractions, my hope is that they focus a bit more on some new flat rides. They have the S&S Shot Tower, but really that's it as far as thrill rides go. And considering the level of detail that they've put into each of these attractions, I know they could theme up a really good flat ride. IMG did that with the Thor Topspin, and it looks incredible. In addition to a slow-moving boat ride, I also like the idea of maybe a log flume here. Just in general, another water ride I think would be a big win, and those are really easy to theme. The one at Warner Brothers, themed to the Flintstones, is amazing. I think they're pretty good on dark rides. I don't think they need to add another one. Their past two additions were roller coasters. They have a pretty well-rounded collection of roller coasters, but I do think they are missing the one big standout world-class coaster. Because right now that's Capital Bullet Train, I guess. It's good, but it's not a headliner. I think an Intamin Mega Coaster would be perfect here. Something airtime focused would be sick. And really, I hope that Motiongate has a bright future ahead of it. They've been open as of now when this video is being made for less than 10 years. And even though attendance isn't what they want, they are doing a lot of things right. Parks like Disney's Hollywood Studios or Universal Studios Florida can be kind of frustrating because they're a weird mishmash of everything where it doesn't feel super cohesive. They're clearly having an identity crisis, and Motiongate is not like that at all. It has a very clear idea that has been carried out from start to finish. It's not perfect, but it's a dang good example of just how good a studio park can be. So for that reason, I think Motiongate is the best park in Dubai, and in general is the most well-rounded theme park in the Emirates. Certain aspects of other parks might be done better, obviously Ferrari World has better roller coasters, but their dark rides suck. Motiongate has good roller coasters, good dark rides, beautiful theming. It's a little bit of everything where some of the other parks might be more obviously lacking in something. So I 100% recommend checking this place out. I truly look forward to coming back one day, hopefully sooner than later. So let me know down in the comments below if you've been to Motiongate Dubai, if you agree with the points that I brought up, if you think there's anything I missed, be sure to post that below, and stay tuned for more park reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.